pass, not another moment. I want to live intentionally in light of eternity. I want to love like you loved. I want to love with my life.
Well, good morning to both campuses at Medina, one church at Medina and one church at Akron. Different format today. I really miss gathering you, but the weather told us to be safe. So we want to make sure we post this so you can keep up with the rest of this series. So today we're going to continue in the series, Love Like Jesus. And our goal in this series is to look at some of the characteristics or qualities of Jesus that he wanted those who choose to follow him to mimic. So week one, we talked about forgiving like Jesus. Last week was about serving like Jesus. And we gave this definition of serving. It's the act of putting the needs of others above ourselves. And today we're going to talk about connecting like Jesus. In his book, The Purpose-Driven Life, Rick Warren used Acts chapter 2, which is a recording of how the early church functioned, as a backdrop to answer this question: what on earth am I here for? Because knowing our purpose will add tremendous meaning to our life. I read recently about Adeline Demiquez, who died in San Diego, California. Now, her death was noteworthy. You know why? Because she was the oldest living American at 114 years. She outlived her children, and she outlived some of her grandchildren. She was interviewed by the Associated Press, and they asked her the secret of her longevity. And this is what Adeline said. She said, "I knew God had a purpose for my life from the beginning to the end." Now, the genius of the purpose-driven life was Rick Warren summarized how God wanted all of us to live out our life according to what he called 5 purposes. The first purpose was this, right? That we would worship God. The second purpose was connect, that we would connect. The third purpose is that we grow. The fourth purpose was that we serve. The fifth purpose was that we would reach. And so we've talked about these. Last week we talked about the serve piece of this, number 4. I want to just mention number 1 just for a minute, the worship piece of these purposes, because this is what worship was all about for God, right? Worship was about us getting to know him. Not only to get to know him, but discover how he loves us. And then our worship is us loving God back. Worship is more than a Sunday thing. It's offering our whole life to him, according to Romans 12, as a living sacrifice. Now, this is true about everybody in this room. Everybody will surrender to something or to someone. If not God, we'll opt for surrendering to money or fear or pride or lust or ego. E. Stanley Jones said, if we don't surrender to Christ, then we will surrender to chaos. So worship looks like this. I worship God on Sunday. You ready? I worship God by loving my family. I worship God in the work I do, and I worship God in my desires. So his number 1 purpose for us was to worship. Now, number 2 was this, that we would connect. That we would connect with him, and we connect with his family. Look at this verse. It's the first verse in the message notes. Follow along as I read it. God is the one who made all things, and all things are for his glory. Now, here we go. He wanted to have many children and to share in his glory. God's desire in the last part of that verse was to have many children share in his glory. He's at work even right now, gathering his family, right? Some that are lost. They're totally disconnected from God. There's others that are confused. They're trying to connect, but they're struggling to understand. And then there's those, maybe like you here today, that are deeply connected to God. The entire Bible in a nutshell is simply this. It's about God gathering his family. Now, if you have kids, you know how difficult it is to get them to follow instructions. You can have 2 children, you can have 5, or you can have 8 children, but to try to get them to follow directions and instructions is nearly impossible. Now, think about that. You have 2, 5, or 8 kids. God's dilemma is he has 1 million kids, and he's trying to get them moving in the same direction. It's got to be like trying to herd cats. So God wants us to love his family. He wants us to connect, and so this is what God's family is. God's family is the church. And the church is God's family. So Paul, early church leader, said this to Timothy in 1 Timothy 3:14 and 15. He said, I'm writing you so you will know how to live with God's family. Church in God's eyes is not an institution. It's not an organization, a club, or a building. Church is a family that we are a part of. So being part of the church is one of the purposes that he had for our life. He wanted us to be connected to each other like we are connected to him. So how do we live this connect piece out in life? 4 levels. Ready? You can begin to fill in on the notes. 4 levels of connection, right? One is membership. And membership is choosing to belong. Paul reminds the church at Ephesus of this. He says this to the church at Ephesus: you are members of God's family and belong in God's household with every other Christian. The Christian life is not just a matter of believing, it's a matter of belonging. Unlike human birth, in which we had no choice of which family we were born into. I mean, how many of you, just by a show of hands, right, would wish you could have picked a different family when you were growing up? How many still wish you could pick a different family? Yeah, I wish I could have picked my friend Scott's family. You know why? Because they had money and they had things. I mean, Scott always had the best bike, the best baseball glove, and the bat. And when he got his license, can I tell you what? He drove his dad's new Delta 88 Olds. You know what I drove? I drove a 12-year-old Chevy Impala wagon. It's a bummer when you are a teenager to drive that kind of car. But unlike our natural family, we get to pick our church family. And there are a lot of churches to pick from. I mean, some, right, the dress code is ties and a shirt. You know, some, the style of music is organ and piano. Some pastors wear robes, and some pastors wear jeans. And we get to pick one, but the important thing is this: pick one. You got to pick one. You've heard this said, and maybe even you've said this: I'm a Christian, but I don't belong to a church. Think about that for a minute. That's like saying, I am a football player, but I don't want to be on a team. Or I'm a tuba player, but I don't want to be in an orchestra. Or I'm a soldier, but I don't want to be in a platoon. America is the only country, I think, that has floating believers that bounce from church to church, but they never belong. Often critiquing, but they never connect. I remember a couple that came into our church in Amherst, and our church was much like this. They came in and they were suit and tie, and she had a dress on. And they had a very closed body position when they were sitting there, observing the service. And so I did my follow-up call like any pastor should. I made a phone call back then and said, hey, it was good to have you guys in church. And they said, well, we want you to know that we won't be back. And I paused for a minute. I just said, okay. And then they said, don't you want to know why we won't be back? And I was thinking to myself, not really, you know? And they began to pick apart people in the church and how they were dressed, and they picked apart the music and the message. And I just stopped them and I said, how about if you do me a favor? Do me a favor. When you do find a place to connect, would you do me a favor? And would you call me on the phone and let me know what church that is? Can I tell you what happened? They never called. You know what I believe? They probably never found a place to connect because they were critiquing everyone they went into. If we don't connect, can I tell you, we will only grow so far in our walk with God because I need you and you need me. Something else to think about, right? This is what Jesus said. He said, I happen to love the church. As a matter of fact, he would refer to the church as his bride. Not attending church is like saying, Jesus, I like you, but I don't like your wife, huh? No, we wouldn't say that. So membership is choosing to belong. That's one way to connect. A second way is friendship, which is learning to share. The writer of the book of Acts described the early church this way. He said that this is what happened. All the believers met together constantly and shared everything with each other. 2 thoughts. You can't develop friendships without meeting together, and you can't develop friendships without sharing. How many of you, by show of hands, right? How many of you have a 10-year-old friendship? Does anybody have a 20-year-old friendship? How many of you had a 30-year-old friendship? Your most blessed. Baptism was awesome the other night. I mean, 20 people from Epic Church and One Church Medina and One Church Akron came together and were baptized in the same night. This sanctuary was full as we gathered. It was a gathering of God's family. One of the cool things that happened to me personally is there are some people who attend Epic Church that I've been friends with for 25 years. We don't get to see each other each week. We don't worship together anymore. But we hung out in the sanctuary and we began to share experiences as if it was yesterday. And we caught up on each other's life. Most people are lonely because they don't make friendships. Why? Just some reasons, because we're busy working. We're achieving. We're doing other stuff. Not all bad stuff. But if we're going to develop relationships, we're going to have to give that relationship time, and we're going to have to make it a priority. See, one of the loneliest times in my life I had about 10 years ago, I decided to relax and play a round of golf by myself. I went to Batavia Country Club early in the morning. Nobody golfs early in the morning. I got a cart, but I didn't keep score. It's cool when you don't keep score and you're by yourself, because if you don't like the shot, you just throw down another ball, and then you don't have to lie on your scorecard. And so I was just playing golf by myself. I came to the ninth tee. It was a 350-yard par 4. I hit my tee shot about 200 yards, took out my 5-wood, which is my 150-yard club, hit it towards the hole. I stood back and I was watching, and I was like, that's going right towards the pin. It took 2 bounces, bounced up on the green, and rolled into the hole. It was my first eagle ever. It was 2 shots to do what you get 4 shots to do. I jumped up and down next to the cart. I jumped in the cart, flew up to the green, ran up to the hole just to check if what I saw was true. I picked my ball up out of the hole, held it up in the air to celebrate, and I had one of the loneliest moments of my life. You know why? Because none of my friends were there. And I looked over to the left, and right to the left of the 9th hole at the Batavia Country Club is a driving range. So I jumped in the car, rode over. There was one guy on the driving range. I said, hey, did you see that shot? And the guy looked at me like, what are you, some kind of weirdo? And he went back to hitting balls. See, no. Moments like these, what those make it so special is you share them with other people. And can I tell you just on the other end? You know, when you tell your friends that you got an eagle on a par 4, they don't believe you. They don't believe you. They just think, okay, how many duffs did you have that you did not count? No. We're made for relationships with each other. So there are 3 things in the notes the Bible tells us to share. I'm going to go quick through these. One is this. I love this verse, right? I love this verse. We share our experiences. Listen to this verse. It says this, right? As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. You know what that verse is saying? That in this room, there is a wealth of knowledge from past experiences, that when we share it with each other, those experiences can help someone else. Another thing that we share is our homes. Follow as I read this next verse. It says this, open your homes to each other. Why would Peter say open your homes to each other? Or if I can put it in contemporary terms, why would we gather at a Tim Hortons with other people from church? I'll tell you why. Because it's hard to connect in a crowd. For the first 300 years that the church existed, they did not meet in a building. It was the fastest growing period in church history. You know what? China is a modern day example. It's an atheistic nation in which there's an underground movement of people following Christ, but they cannot meet in public, so they meet underground, home to home. There's estimates about how many of the Christians are in China, and the results are staggering. No churches to meet in. They just meet in homes. Someone said that the garage door opener and the air conditioner changed our culture. Now we no longer connect with our neighbors when we get out of our cars together. No, we just wave, pull into our garage, go into our air conditioning houses, and stay there all night. The second thing, right, that God wanted us to share is our problems. I love this quote. When you share your joy, it's doubled. And when you share your problem, it's cut in half. At One Church, we have 2 opportunities to develop friendships. One is this, to join a growth group. And there's some listed in the program today that you could join today. Another way is to join a serve team. 4 levels of connection that God wanted us to have. One is membership, one is friendship, another is partnership, doing my part. I love this quote by Rick Warren. God did not bring us here on Sunday morning to sit and soak in a spiritual spa. No, he brought us here to serve together. In our house growing up, every member of our family had a part. My mother would put a chart on the side of the cupboard next to the sink, and we each had responsibility as children that we had to do during the week. It could be dusting, it could be vacuuming, it could be trash, or my worst thing I ever got stuck with was doing dishes, because we didn't have a dishwasher back then, but everyone had a job to do. And it gave all 5 of us kids a great work ethic. Like today, I would gladly hire one of my brothers and sisters because I know how they work. But Paul instilled this value in the churches he started. In the Corinthian church, he said this to them. Ready? He said, we are partners working together for God. One more time. We are partners working together for God. So God has given us one church a job to do, and we get it done by working together, everyone doing their part. Come to Discover You, by the way, this next week, and figure out what your part is and place is on the team. Someone asked Mother Teresa, as she was caring for the lepers and those with leprosy in India, she said, how do you get past the disease and the smell? And then that wise old spiritual lady said this. She said, every person I bathe or bandage, I change the image I see. I imagine the face of Jesus, and I do it for him. Not bad motivation to serve. So 4 levels of connection. One is membership, one is friendship, one is partnership. The last one is kinship. Kinship, loving believers like family. Koinonia is a Greek word that is used for this together thing that we do. I put a definition of koinonia in the program. It's this: being as committed to one another as we are to Jesus. Being as committed to one another as we are to Jesus. Paul said it this way to the church at Rome. He said this. He said, be devoted to each other like a loving family. It's connecting to others like we would connect to Jesus. See, the deepest level of connection is sacrificing for each other. How do we get there? By standing with each other in crisis. I heard this set of firemen before, firefighters. They're the ones that go in when everybody else is going out. I mean, isn't that the definition of the church? That when everyone else is walking out of someone's life, the church walks in. It's hanging in tough times. There's a lot of things that one church could be known for. We could be known for our music. We could be known for our building. We could be known for our strategy. We could be known for our messages. But let's keep this at the top of the list. Let us be known for our love. When a church loves like that, you have to lock the doors to keep it from growing. See, people today, you got to understand this. People aren't looking for religion. They're not looking for doctrine. They're not even looking for the name on the sign. They're looking for a place to be loved. And they're looking for a family. Whenever there's a first-time guest at the church, we send out an email with a request that they would fill out a first-time guest survey. And this is a question on one of the questions on that survey. What did you like best? Can I tell you what somebody responded recently? They said this: I felt like I was home. What were they saying? I felt like this was a group of believers that were family, and I could be a part. Sunday, August 16th, 1987. Northwest Flight 287 crashed outside of Detroit International Airport just after taking off. Cecilia, a 4-year-old from Type, Arizona, was on the plane. She survived that crash in 1987, and today she's 35 years old. Everyone wondered, how was it that this little girl survived a fiery crash? Further investigation revealed that when the plane was falling, Cecilia's mother unlocked her seatbelt, squatted down in front of her little girl, and hovered over her, gripping the back of the seat. Cecilia lived because in the face of death, her mother focused and she never took her eyes off her daughter. We're called to live our lives like that. We're called to look for people who are going down like Jesus did and love like Jesus did, refusing to let them die. I ask you a question today. Who do you know that needs this? Who do you know that needs a church family? See, I said when we started this series that if we're going to love like Jesus, it's going to be counterculture. We're taught in our culture that happiness comes from independence. It comes from being financially independent. It comes from being relationally independent. It comes from being spiritually independent. But the truth is, happiness doesn't come from independence. Happiness comes from interdependence. See, connecting with God and connecting with others is God's solution to fatigue. It's God's solution to fear. It's God's solution to failure. It's God's solution to frustration. So in closing, I just want to ask you two questions. Are you connected to God? And secondly, if you're connected to God, are you connected to his family? You say, Pastor Rick, how do I get connected to God today? Well, it's pretty simple. It's not complicated. We don't have to take a course in theology to get connected to God. No. This is what we do. We pray to him and talk to him and tell him, God, I'm sorry for the way I've lived my life. I've ignored you up until this point in my life. I know, Lord, more than anything else today, I need to be connected to you. So, God, I'm asking you that you would forgive my sin. I'm asking you, God, that you would gather me and take me into your family because I need it. And maybe today you're already connected to God. But maybe somewhere in your past you got hurt by the church and you figured that the best thing you could do was stay connected to Jesus but not be connected to a church. No. We need to give it another try. We need to not let the past keep us from having what's very good for us in the present. And so I encourage you today, make a commitment to belong. If you don't have a church family, make this your church family. Become a part of us today. Pray with me, would you? Pray with me. God, I thank you. I thank you for the good news that yesterday ended last night. And if we were disconnected from you last night, we can be connected to you today. I thank you, Lord, that the things in the past don't have to dominate us in the future. And I pray for healing for somebody, Lord, today that's here that got hurt by the church, that they'd be able to let it go and start a fresh start with you today. You're an incredible God. I thank you for the way that you made us, that really we do need each other, God. And more importantly, we need you in our life. And so we thank you today in Jesus' name. Amen.